Well, is your average ugly high schooler enrolled in a magic academy with no magic just because of good old plot armor? Just as everyone is trying to win glory by becoming the most powerful mage, Will is in it to lose his V-card with his childhood friend. Everyone at the academy, including the professors, makes fun of him. However, Will continues to prove that sometimes a wand needs a sword in the capital city. Children with a knack for magic are prioritized in the best magic academy. But does it mean that no talents like our MC with zero affinity for magic have no chance? The answer is hell. No cause of plot armor interference. On the 7th dungeon floor, Will battle strong monsters with a sword to collect extract curriculum points. It would have been so much easier if it was a girl, but men have to work for things he wants to do, whatever it takes to school. The magic Duchess in his class by playing match in class. A student explains that channeling a tiny bit of magic into the bulk ore creates a chemical reaction. The sulfur produced from it can be used as a catalyst to conjure beautiful flames. Professor Edward compliments him for being right and wants someone to demonstrate the procedure. He picks Will, despite knowing his balls have dried up of magic juices. However, he is dozing off in class thinking who's going to be the next president of the United States. Edward calls out his name multiple times to wake him up. He asks the professor to repeat the explanation, but Edward can't give one fudge about him. He just wants him to come down on his knees and demonstrate the art of earning extra points. Edward's condescending claims is a simple process. He just needs to transfer a little bit of magic and the fire will be lit well. Will applies his full concentration on the spell, but can't produce any results. Moments later, the professor clicks his tongue, making the whole class laugh. He silences the class, expressing his disbelief that their institute allows a no-show like him to study magic. He believes that note-taking bookworms are only good for doing grunt work. He deems him entirely beyond help. At that moment, a fellow 6-year student C casts a basic fire spell to light up the torch. Edward reminds him that casting without permission is prohibited in their class. Cyan, the arrogant brat who thinks of himself as God, excuses himself for this behavior. Saying his pal needed a light, Edward casts dark lighting magic to crystallize the flames, but more so he intends to make a point. He reminds everyone that magic is more important than cup size. Magic is the supreme authority, giving esteemed status to those with innate talent. The rest can stay in the hallways and clean like a good little janitor. Later in the hallway, Cheyenne is lackey, a normal cliche of every bully. Stop Will from crossing the road. They're about to drop nukes on his ass, but his knight in shining armor. Colette comes between them. Say wants her to join the party and bully him. However, she walks up to him like a gangster, claiming Will is more kind than he can ever be. She tells him to stop bullying her friend. Making his face go, NS Sand suggests bringing back her friend. From well a land, he reminds them that Will can never be a Mayo vendor. Colette feels bad for him having to experience Edward's class. However, he's glad that a cute girl like her is worrying about him. She freaks out at his flattery and claims it won't get him anywhere. But the way she's acting, I believe Will is going to get lucky tonight. He claims that a Jigga Chad taught him to compliment girls whenever the chance comes. She tells him to shut up before her fist flats his face. All of a sudden, Will silently watches the tower in the center of the city. Colette is worried about this sudden change and asks what has happened. Will says the sky is looking as beautiful as ever. They can't believe the 5 Maggie Vanders hold up the sky on a daily basis. Long ago, beings known as celestial hosts threaten humanity's existence and fill the world with darkness. 5 mages stood up in defiance to push back the threat. They created a barrier to lift up the sky. These 5 mages were given the highest honorary title for a mage, known as M. Vander. Every magician alive dreams of achieving this glory at least once in their life. Colette wonders if the Ice Maiden is currently watching them. He assures her that she's watching from the window the year before. Will's childhood friend Ilaria told him about giant orbs called the sun and moon orbiting the real sky, but she was most intrigued by a sunset at that time. Both made a promise to become MGU Vanders and watch the sunset together. Ilaria took that little promise, made on a whim, seriously with her talent. She became the youngest MG Vander and climbed up the tower. However, his talents can even be considered mediocre, but his determination to fulfill his promise is undying. After the break, Professor Worker shouts at Will, asking if he's gone nuts. He went to the dungeon without permission and fought on. The 7th floor, still after reviewing the materials from the monster worker, grants him 2 credits, lifting up his mood. The professor asks if he's still hell-bent on becoming M. Vanderwell counters his question, asking if it's really as bad as people say. Worker gives it to him straight, explaining he needs to advance to the upper institute before aiming to become a Mangi Vander. To graduate, you must have superior credits from written work, spell work, and practicals. Despite understanding the situation, Will insists on earning credits from practicals alone. Ultimately, Worker realizes that trying to reason with Will is like crying on deaf ears. He tells that he needs to gather 4 credits before the end of the week. Seconds later, he realizes that the week will end in 2 days. He sits down on his knees to look for a monster that is worth 4 credits. Worker thinks out loud, naming a monster worth 4 credits that Will hasn't defeated before. Unbeknownst to them, Shine hears about the monster and decides to kill the monster before Will can get to it. He will finally get rid of the boy who has tarnished the reputation of their academy. On the other hand, Will enters the 6th floor of the dungeon with Kiki by his side. The cat isn't sure about him fighting a Baskerville. However, he assures Kiki that he won't get burnt. Like the last time, in the meantime, Cheyenne and his 2 lackey are focused on taking out the Baskerville. To expel Will, one of them asks if they have protection in their pockets. Cheyenne reminds him that top geese like him don't need safety precautions. He plans to use his search spell to find the beast. Suddenly, a giant monster with insane speed appears in front of them. Scaring the 2 lackey away, Will overhears their scream and immediately follows the sound, judging from the activation. He assumes they are not far upon reaching the scene. He finds a 10-credit evil sent bullying a child. He doesn't know why the evil sentinel moved up several FLs. He then glances at the human, who ends up being Kanan. He constantly casts fire magic at the thing. However, Will knows that his measly attacks can't do against a high-level monster. As the monster gets close to Saiyan, it dawns on him that Shai might die. Will realizes he needs to step up and save him. At that moment, he remembers all the time Ken and his friend bullied him. He asked himself, it's really necessary to save a scumbag like him. Seconds later, he remembers that Ilaria called him the kindest person in the world. He wants to be someone worthy who can stand beside her. Despite being a no talent in magic, he wants to be her sword. Will steps onto the battlefield and saves Cheyenne's ass from getting squashed. He pushes back the monster's feet away from C using his muscle strength. Will goes on the offensive and strikes its shell. The impact from the strike destroys the ground underneath them. Back on the surface, Edward rushes to Worker's office in the middle of the night. No, he's not a fan of B manga. He reveals that Cheyenne and his piece of work, Council of DH Bags, went into the dungeon without authorization. He stands up in disbelief that an elite student can pull such a stunt. Edward reveals they are on the 6th floor and asks Warner to send his familiar inside. Upon hearing this, he calms down, telling Edward there is no need to panic. He activates his spying orb, revealing that Will is on the same core as them. Meanwhile, in the dungeon, the impact from Will's sword and the monster fangs clashing. Destroy the 6th floor, he spins around the monster to create momentum and cut down its horn. The monster anger pushes him away, utilizing the distance. The monster throws rocks at him from the destroyed floors. However, Will slices through the stones before it even hits the ground. He then sneaks attacks from above, landing a fatal blow. Cheyenne is watching this battle from the front row seat, but still can't believe it. He wonders if he is the same Will surf for it from before. Even Edward can't believe his eyes. That is when Worker states that Will is totally different from them. As the battle continues, Warner explains that Will possesses the robust body of a dwarf. His observation skills can read enemy patterns after seeing them. Once he demonstrates this move by countering an attack that the monster used before he heavily damages the monster. Making it furious, Worker claims that in a world full of wands, Will is a lone sword. As the monster unleashes its fire breath, he reveals his true power. Will cuts through the magic attack with his special sword. The slash of his sword is like a bolt of lightning, defeating his enemies in an instant. When the smoke clears up, he asks if Cheyenne is injured in any way. He lets out his frustration by biting on his tongue and making it bleed on the other hand. Edward slams the table with full force. He refuses to believe that a boy with no magic can somehow transcend it. Worker tries to stop him, but his efforts are fruitless. Upon returning to the surface, Will gets scolded by Professor before getting the 10 credits from defeating the monster 5 years earlier. Will seem like your average man who can't get any action. The background NPCs go goad about Will's lack of magic power. Some think it was just a rumor, but the majority knows the fact to be true. He is just a bait to lure Ilaria to join the academy. However, they think he should be expelled since she climbed the tower and became the youngest Magio Vander. He walks to the principal's office with a sad look, telling everyone that it is his last day in the school. Professor Worker stands in the room as a mediator between Will and Cauldron. The principal, she waves her wand and hands him a sword made of special metal that can cut through magic. Unexpectedly, a new Will wakes up and hit him. As he cuts through all the magic circles cast by Cauldron Worker, is so taken aback by his performance that his legs give out and his mouth is left open. In the meantime, Cauldron laughs at the unique thing they have in their hands. She decides to allow them to continue studying at the academy. Despite his shortcomings, shocked Worker repeats what she just said and asks if age is fudging up her mind. He reminds her that Juan used any magic like Zero. She clings. Her eyes are not done yet. In fact, she has never heard of anything before. Will interrupts their conversation to shower them with questions. He asks if ascending the tower will be possible. If he studies at the academy, with a quavering voice, he asks if becoming strong can help him join Ilaria. At the top of the tower, Cauldron explains that his dreams will come true, but only if he is diligent and firm against daunting experiences. Only then he can reach the top of the tower. He tightly holds the sword. Taking Cauldron words to heed after he leaves, she asks Worker to keep a close eye on him. Like a godfather, she's eager to see a sword's journey to becoming a wand. Back in the president, Will sniffs on chocolate in Willy Worker's class. The lecture today is about ascending the tower, which means attending the upper academy. Only those can become Magivanders, the topmost honor a mage can achieve at the top of the tower. Mercedes Cuss, there are only 2 ways a mage can obtain this rank. First, they must create a new type of magic, not known by humanity. Second, they must earn 72,000 credit points. Worker reveals that the majority of mages ascend with the first option, while there are only a minority that can earn 70,000 credits at this point. His class has no chance of graduating. Ascending the tower is a far-fetched dream, and so he will drill them in his supplementary class, making everyone soup after classes. Will is like his soul will slip away from the mortal realm without any warning. Colette can't believe Warner whacked them into taking supplementary. He informs her that Warner made them take full mock exams and instructed them on exams. She reminds him that his writing credits are at its max, but Will is falling behind because of no talent in spell work. However, failing in one subject doesn't mean he should not study it. Moments later, they find Can and his lackey talking about him defeating an evil sentinel. He explains the whole scene from start to finish. The mob thinks that Cheyenne standing in the academy will reach the top 3 most talented students. However, he knows that everything is just a scam. It's like taking peaks of a studio and saying it's a private jet to add fire to his fuel. He sees Will and Colette pass by him. He makes his way through the mob, grabbing his collar. He wants to know how a talentless brat like him does something like that before his sentence can finish. Colette intervenes, forcing him to stop bullying the weak. On the other hand, Edward enters the principal's office to request Will's expulsion from the academy. She does not understand his reasons to expel him when he successfully reached his 6th and final year. Why should she knock him off this far in the game, as he puts it? The academy doesn't need a warrior who's not a mage. Plus, you can somehow surpass magic without using it. She opens Will's previous performance record, sharing his unrivaled written scores with Edward. She also believes that his research sheds light on a unique perspective. He excels to such a degree that calling it mere excellence is insulting. There are many paths open for him in the future. The academy has the responsibility of producing learned scholars for that faithful day. Edward reminds him that Will won't settle for some run-in-the-mill scholar position. He wants to become an Imagi Vander. On that note, she allows him to test Will to his heart's content. The contents and extremism of the test is up for him to decide. As he leaves, she thinks for herself that Edward knows Meyer Vander's best. At the same time, Will hides his sword with Colette's help. She comments on him never Changing a bit, he takes the insult as a compliment. Of course, plus the officials won't let them carry a sword on campus, and his roommate Rusty won't let him out without some nuts. Later in the library, they won't diligently study about the Battle of Garzaro from the magic year 344. The dwarves were erased from another world who were pissed because of exploitation over work and worse treatment than the elves the Door Wars army was, 10,000 in comparison. The tower only sent one mage. Colette wonders why Will is studying so hard when his written exams credits are perfect. He wants to revise everything to ensure no credit is lost, more so who understands what the dwarves felt. The statement, "never give up," gives him determination that can surpass magic. She immediately realizes that the Sobble line is from Worker. He kept trying to make his tool up and running and still is in the trying phase. As they have fun in the library, Edward invaded their privacy, telling them to book a room. Nonsense society asked who to come, to the spell training room alone. She didn't know Edward had that type of fetishes on his way to the hall. Edward reminds him that he's funking spell class. He will give him a personal lesson as supplementary only for himself. The two stand face to face with silence in the air. Emer casts his dark lightning spell. Destroying an area near his foot, he says that Will's assignment is to land a single hit on him. He will gain 5 spell work credit for completing his task. Otherwise will be expelled, leaving him shocked during this time. Worker knocks on the principal's door, answering her summons after entering. He finds a giant orb playing Will's and Edward's match on Liv. She explains that Edward is conducting a test, just as she valued his plea for Will to continue studying. She must consider Edward's worry for Will pursuing a delusion. Worker doesn't have a problem with the test, but the person taking the test cauldron forces him to speak his mind. He reveals that Edward is the closest thing to AI. Vander's sure he lost before becoming one, but that doesn't mean he isn't an ENT back in the spell hall. Edward casts a low-level dark magic spell. However, Will is unable to comprehend the spell's outlandish power. He leaps in from the side using his superior speed to land a flying kick. Unfortunately, Edward has casted a shield on himself. He claims that trying to break a magic shield with his leg is laughable. He sends him flying. With a simple spell, Will can barely open his eyes at this moment. Edward's casting speed is so fast that he can counter his attack. Plus, the last attack was fatal, making him cough up blood as he tries to gather himself. Edward declares he's going to use 2 spells. His flames burn him to ash and his shield to stop his laughable kicks. With that said, he cast a magical series overlapping a single casting circle multiple times. Will realizes he is going to attack with a barrage of dark flames. The attack hits him directly, pushing him back a few feet. He realizes that beating someone like Edward without his sword is impossible. Luckily, Colette is organizing her locker because there is nothing better to do. She wonders how the lesson is going. Naturally, she assumes that Edward is forcing Will to give him head, or he might be fulfilling his spanking fetish. Suddenly, Kiki arrives on the scene injured due to the dark flames. He points at the sword locker, telling her that Will is dangerous. Meanwhile, Edward states that Maju Vander is the pinnacle of magic. While his skills are not even mediocre, as he approaches Will's lifeless body, he reminds him about the Battle of Garzaro. He reveals that the dwarves rebelled with an army of 10,000. He asks, well, how many mages were sent by the tower? He tries to get up and answer the question, but Edward steps on his head, saying there was only one mage. Despite this, Will doesn't lose hope of winning. He grabs his leg, forcing him to move. At this point, Edward is confused as to what noble reason Will holds in his heart that drives him. He tightly holds his heart and says he wants to stand whom he loves with all his heart. He will fulfill the promise made with Ilaria, to watch the sunset shocked to death. You can't believe that Will is aiming to reach the pinnacle of magic just for some worldly love. But he can't give one shits about what Edward thinks at that moment. Colette rushes to the scene and gives him the blade. Amir attacks with killing intent, but Will slices through the attack. He casts a bee of spells instead of running away. Despite his hands and feet shaking, Will knows that passing through the flames is his only option of winning. During his run, Will explains, there is more to the Battle of Garzaro than what people know. The legendary dwarf commander landed a hit on the mage, making him acknowledge the sword did reach ORW even for 1 second. He uses the smoke from the attack to launch a powerful strike from Edward's blind overhead. His power is enough to break the shield and land a hit. Edward doesn't say a word except rewarding. With a 5 spell credits and leaves on the other hand, Cauldron laughs her lungs out, complimenting Will's power 10 years ago on that day. Ilaria was going to the Upper Institute. Will was following her like a loser. She turns to him, reminding him that he's the kindest person in the whole world. This is something that she will always know with that. Said she says goodbye and turns her back to him. Soon Will's emotionally damaged brain catches up to the fact his vCard is going away. He promises never to give up trying to climb the tower. He will definitely stand beside her, even if there is no magic potion left in his balls. His words tear through her heart, but Ilaria keeps walking to hide her emotions from Will. But then he says they will watch the sunset together, making her stop. Ilaria didn't realize he would remember the childhood promise. She turns with tears in her eyes, promising to wait for him, no matter how many years it takes. After he leaves, Professor Worker intends to say a few consolation words. However, he overhears him sobbing. Will makes a promise to himself, saying it's the last time when he will cry aloud with a miserable voice in the present. Will, the no-talent overachiever book learner, is a self-sustained student at the academy. He wakes up early to deliver newspapers in the local area. The citizens began liking him for his work ethic and polite attitude. They are eager to see him return to Jen's place for his part-time job. He quickly rushes to deliver the remaining newspaper and heads to the academy on his way. Will stumbles on the stairs, drop all the newspapers. However, he pulls a flash stunt to gather everything. He notices that Ilaria, the Alvis Vena, is on the front page for inventing a new magic. With this, she has invented 12 original spells, a feat no mage has ever achieved in history. Suddenly, Will reads a request made from the Upper Academy to collect ice cores from Frost Walkers. Unexpectedly, the client is Ilaria herself, which gets his juices overflowing. He returns to his dorm to ask Rosti for some new magic gear. He excitedly tells him about the order Ilaria made. She asked him about classes. Bobble says there aren't any today. He will visit the 4th floor to collect ice cores from Frostwalkers. For that, he needs our top tools, which are custom-made. After collecting his items, Will leaves for the dungeon. He reveals that the great ancestor, Queen Mage Mercedes, said everything came from the dungeons. She told the future generation to venture into the unknown with knowledge and wisdom. She wanted them to conquer the unknown along their path. According to her, everything is connected from top to bottom. On that note, Will makes his way onto the 4th floor. There he finds half of the academy who whack off every night on Ilaria's pictures, firing off shots everywhere. He then notices Cheyenne blazing off Frostwalkers left and right. His lackey butter him up as usual, claiming he's the best mage in town. However, Cheyenne knows his performance isn't enough to reach Will's level during his fight with the evil. Sentinel Will senses his bloodlust overflowing, like his juices, realizing there will be no monsters left in the area for him. He rushes deeper into the 4th floor to find powerful Frost Walkers. Unexpectedly, Will finds a low-level monster preying on a young girl. He quickly steps into battle mode and kills the ostrich with multiple sword slashes. The girl can't believe he just used a sword instead of magic. Iris introduces herself as the girl who often bites more than she can chew. On the other hand, Worker explains that creating your own spell is a great achievement. It is so great that the mage advances to the top of the tower without any further requirements. The entire class knows that this only sounds easy. However, inventing a new spell, SP, is not a joke. Rose wants to know about Worker's thoughts on the news this morning. He claims that creating 12 original spells made her the best mage in human history. She asks if Colette is jealous because Will is going to the dungeon, for Ilaria. Worker schools them for causing a commotion while the class is still in process. But she is still worried about Will's intentions for stepping into the dungeon. Back in the dungeon, she asks if he's the senior from the 6th year who can't use magic, making him the first of his time. Will finds it odd that someone like Iris would call him a senior. However, she wants to respect the person who just saved her life. She wants to help fulfill the Upper Academy's order and help them keep the sky from falling. What reveals that Iris is not exaggerating her claims. The sky they are under is not real. It is just a barrier in the sky held by the power magic of the Magi of Vanders. According to the lore, The world will be plunged into darkness once again when the sky falls. That is the day the calamity will be upon them. They are learning the order not because everyone admires the Mjavanders, but because they want to help them keep the barrier running. On their way, Iris mentions that she has met with Ilaria once before. One day she was surrounded by a horde of monsters ready to devour her. At that point, offering her body to them was the only option, but Ilaris saved her in the nick of time from getting eaten afterward. They talked about a lot of things like boys and the ways they try to get inside their tunnel. With that said, she dedicated her life to Ilaria. Upon hearing of the order, she got so excited and unintentionally ventured deep into the fourth floor. However, after looking around, she realizes that most of the students have already cleaned out the area. Even her search spell can't pick up anything in the area. At the same time, Will goes down onto his knees and starts observing the area. Iris, a magic user, can understand what he is doing. He claims that frost walkers leave ice shards when walking. Most of them are between 0.5 and 1 mile wide. However, this is double the size. This means that there is a colossal size of a head. Iris can understand how a non-magic Shur can sniff out such details when her search spell isn't working. He explains that magic is great and all, but it is not absolute. Especially in the dungeon, he can match magic users with knowledge, wisdom, and experience. Iris is shocked that experience can be a factor in survival. As these words are uttered from her mouth, a giant frost walker jumps out of the cave and attacks him. Will is forced to jump out of the way. With Iris, the frost walker lets out a huge yawn, freezing the surrounding area. Iris knows that Frost Rex is an advanced subspecies of the Frostwalker lineage. It is a monster that is worth 6 credit points at the same time. The monster attacks with its ice breath, freezing everything in its path. Will carries Iris out of the way and tells her to stay put in one place. She tells him not to act recklessly as the monster is too strong for him. Physical attacks don't work on the monster. This is the reason the monster is known as the Dwarf Killer. The only way to defeat it is to use long Greenwich magic. Otherwise, the monster will freeze him to death. Will tells her not to worry as he has defeated this monster many times. It leaves him to attack, making the monster unleash his breath. Attack once again, however, Will masterfully slides underneath the monster to take advantage of his blind spot, not knowing where he is. The monster launches a rapid fire attack at the cave ceiling, hoping he will get hit by the rubble. Iris is forced to save herself from the rubble and takes shelter behind an ice wall. She sees Will taking advantage of the smoke and rubble to hide his movements. He masterfully runs behind the monster and launches the magic item at him. He then goes back and forth, wrapping it around the tight RPP. The monster Conan unleashes breath attacks, but Will continues wrapping the wire around it. He knows that physical attacks don't work on him, as the Frost Rex's only weakness is fire. And since explosives are also made of fire, this means that Will can defeat it with ES. He lights up the fire, which travels around its body and raging in flames the moment the fire hits. The explosives, it causes the monster to burn to ashes, giving him a flawless victory afterward. The wires from Rose's magic tool retract automatically, making it a magic tool. With creativity, Iris is shocked by his performance on the battlefield and wonders what it would be like in bed. She goes all dark, and when assessing his powers, as it turns out, the note talent is something else entirely. There's a big difference between the rumors and reality, but reporting this find is the real problem. Suddenly, Will tells her about finding the core, which completes their mission on the 4th floor, on top of the tower. Iris walks in a hallway assessing his talents with more detail. She realizes that will make UPF lack of magic power with creativity and ingenuity. Not to mention his battle sense is something that can only be obtained by tremendous experience. She opens her hair and concludes that Will is indeed not a mage, but a very talented warrior. Before entering the main room, she apologizes for intruding inside. She asks the Mangvander for a moment of their time. She asked if her presence in the room is disturbing them. Karit Wisman takes on a condescending tone, claiming it's just the insignificant meeting that makes her skin crawl. They are usually busy with keeping the barrier from getting breached and the world from being destroyed. Ku claims that the celestial hosts outside the barrier are just watching them. Peacefully from the other side is worried that they don't have the numbers or strength to fight them. Hedeneller mentions that they need more elite images for the fateful day. They can't allow the lore to become a reality. Zoe cuts to the chase, asking how things are on the Watcher's end. Did you find anyone worth spending their time on? She reveals that an interesting prospect came up in her search. He can't use magic but is an impeccable warrior. Some of the Magio Vanders instantly refuse this idea, but Zia will train anyone as long as they are good in the end. They decide to wait until the upcoming Grand Magic Festival, hoping that the talented ones will rise up from the masses and leave the trash behind. Watch. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this recap, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more thrilling anime content. Stay tuned for the next adventure with GBJ Recaps.